What a superstar first guest I've got today. He is one of the best players I've ever played with lightning feet, scores bombs from everywhere. But most importantly, he's one of the best guys I've met in football and one of my best mates. So thanks, Lonnie, for joining us.
Thanks, Dams.
You burst onto the scene as a young 16-year-old with a lot of talent. What was your first experience walking into a senior football environment where physicality and aggression are really valued?
Um, well, I think for me it was really intimidating. Probably the main thing was that because I naturally never had that physicality part of my game that came naturally to me. When I started playing senior football, it was between ages of like 16, 18. I was dabbling in it. I was really establishing myself when I was like 18, 19 and being in, professional environments and semi-professional environments. And even though I was 18, 19, because I hit puberty so late, my body was kind of like a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old. So and not only was I physically not really up to it, um, I also didn't naturally have that part of my game where I was aggressive and was like a hard tackler and stuff. And that was something that's obviously valued and praised in a senior environment. So I really struggled with that. And I'm not saying that football isn't a physical game. It is, and you need that as part of your game. But that grittier side where coaches value players who go through people and tackle hard and stuff like that. That just wasn't a natural part of my game. And I think I definitely deserved to be in that senior environment because even though I wasn't physically up to it just yet, my decision making and my ball skills and my feet were really good. So I was able to adapt. And then as my body grew bigger and stronger, I just started to flourish in that senior environment more. But still, even when I did get bigger and stronger, that aggressive side of me really never came out. It's just not a natural part of my game. And I don't think it's something that will ever really come naturally to me. I think it's the way I was maybe brought up. Like my dad's not overly aggressive as a person, so I didn't really have that modeled for me. My parents have always taught me to be like a nice boy. And I know like a lot of other guys, I saw their dads on the sideline getting revved up and like pumping their sons up. And that wasn't my dad. So I guess I didn't have that modeled for me. So that aggression isn't a natural part of my game. So even though I can be physical and do what's necessary to play a role defensively, it's not something that comes naturally to me as a footballer. Yeah.
That definitely resonates with me. I'm someone who, throughout my career, every single one of my coaches have told me to be more aggressive and more of a C word. And people have constantly, really just asked me to try and hurt players more. And I always found that quite challenging for me personally, where I was kind of working out who I was as a person to come to football, a place where I was obsessed with the game and it was really my life. And to be constantly told to be something that wasn't natural or wasn't me. How do you think it's affected your self-concept and your views on masculinity more generally in football and also outside of football?
Yeah, I think within football, it definitely affected me because you want to be part of the boys, and I definitely could see there were other players that were a lot more physical than me, and some teammates, um, and it came down quite hard on me for not being that like rough and tough player. Even though I was doing my defensive job fine, my positioning was good and stuff. I wasn't that enforcer that was going to go through someone to make a point. I feel like I could change a game and influence a game in different ways, like scoring goals and playing decisive passes and never losing the ball or rarely losing the ball. Um, but yeah, within football, it did make me kind of feel less of a man, and that stayed with me outside of football. So I have a feeling that my perception of masculinity has kind of been affected by football because I've been around in change rooms with uber masculine dudes who are like really tough and willing to fight and stuff like that. Not just on the football field, but I've been with guys out on nights out where they wouldn't back down from a fight, and that's just not who I am. And that aggression, I think naturally within our society too, I've always associated with masculinity. And because I wasn't like that and it didn't come naturally to me, and something really had to fire me up to become even close to, maybe hurting someone or doing something overly aggressive, I didn't see myself as much of a man, both within football and outside of football. And I think it's a concept I probably still struggle with because aggression doesn't come naturally to me. And I think being in an environment of football, I've started to think like, oh, well, there's other guys that I've seen that are like that. Is that how I should be? Like, am I less of a man because aggression, is not natural to me?
Yeah. I think I'm really lucky in the fact that I had people like you to look up to and see, what in my view is a real man, someone who is open and expresses their emotions and is actually considerate of other people's emotions as well. So I consider myself really lucky to have had you for that journey. And, possibly if more men are like that, then more kids can see and look up to someone who, is playing a competitive sport where it's really aggressive and physical, but actually these men are actually really good people who treat their families nicely, their friends nicely, their partners nicely.
I think on that note, there's guys in changing rooms that I've really respected a lot who could fluctuate between those things. Like there's some guys that I love playing with because I knew they were always going to make the hard tackles, do the hard work, give me the ball so I can do something nice. There's a few boys that come to mind, but as people, some of those guys, really respected their families, respected their partners. They were kind of similar in terms of their values that I had, which I thought I really looked up to them because they could really bring that white line fever onto a field and then also step away outside of that and not get involved in that sometimes toxic masculine culture that we have in just sport and men in general. And those are some boys that I really look up to. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a toxic masculinity, and we've had some discussions over the journey about certain times where we felt like football was the last place we wanted to go and we're actually dreading going to training. Can you kind of touch on your experiences with moments like that and in what parts of your life it tended to prop up the most?
Yeah. I don't want to be, this is just my experience. I'm speaking from my experience, and maybe by me saying this, some other players will listen to this and resonate with it. Football has definitely been a place that I could get away from certain things in my life, and I enjoyed that aspect. It took my mind off things. It brought me present into the moment. And yeah, certain things were maybe like stressful when I was like at uni or with work or something. It was like a nice place to get away. But I think it was a place that I actually sometimes dreaded going to when I was having relationship issues, around females and stuff like that. And I think, first of all, that was because the way that women get discussed in change rooms, it's very superficial. No one's talking about, a girl's personality or if she's nice. It's all talking about like if they're hot, and there's a lot of talk about sex and all that type of stuff that we all know. And I think when you're going through relationship stuff and breakups, that's the last thing you want to be talking about and hearing, so sometimes when I was going through relationship issues or a breakup, and I'd be dreading to come to football because I knew, most of the time, at some point, whether it's in the warm-up or in the change room, females would be brought up in some kind of way. And because, a particular, female was maybe causing some hurt in my life, I just didn't want to talk about women at all. I just wanted to come there and not have that topic discussed. And there were nights when I'd go and that wasn't discussed and actually feel really good because I could come there and it would take my mind off stuff. And it was good to be around other people and, have a laugh and stuff. But the moment those conversations happened, it really did affect me. And it's not against anyone. It's not like there's anything wrong with those guys talking about that. Everyone can do what they want. It's just I know that I was struggling when I would get to football, and those, that was a hot topic.
Yeah. I know that I've grappled with that a lot myself, and I think a lot of men want to feel attractive to the opposite sex and want to feel wanted by the opposite sex, and the way that it plays out in a changing room and in football environments can sometimes make that the main focus. And it's always been something that I've found really interesting, because I also want those things. Like, they are, for a young person, important to the way you grow up and your self-esteem and that sort of stuff. But it's interesting that the behaviors that are rewarded can sometimes be negative, and that guys with a partner feel like they don't want to bring their partner to football or don't want to speak about their partner because it's not something that's rewarded socially. But yeah, it's a very interesting part of football that I think a lot of these guys are actually really, really good guys, but the environment teaches them to speak and behave in that way. How have you found that gap between your relationships and your football relationships? And do you think there's some work that we can do in that area?
Yeah, because the thing is, also, I just want to make the point that this is just my experience, and I've throughout my whole senior career, I've been really lucky to have liked all my teammates. I really can't think of a team where I've established myself as like a senior player where I've disliked anyone. I've liked everyone, despite everything, and although I have certain values, everyone else has different values, and I really respect them. I think I could see the best in everyone. But sometimes I often did think that people, or because it is part of the culture, that guys would get wrapped up in saying things or doing things that maybe they didn't feel necessarily comfortable with. And it wasn't true to their values, but in order to like fit in and be part of the boys, like you kind of get swept up in it. So yeah, it's nothing against anyone. It's just, yeah, I think it's just different values, and a different set of values that maybe someone else might have, and I've got no problem with it. But I think there is maybe some work to do in terms of like players coming to training and being allowed to be vulnerable. I think that's the biggest thing, is that maybe if those conversations went on and I was allowed to come to training and be vulnerable and say, I'm going through a breakup, that maybe my teammates would be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be talking about this stuff right now. Yeah. But I don't think I ever felt comfortable to do that. And sometimes also I felt like maybe if I was going to be vulnerable to someone could have been vulnerable back to me and be like, wanted to talk about my issues, but I think they were maybe scared of coming across soft. So if I open up to someone, they would kind of give me like, oh, that's crap, what's going on in your life, and kind of move on, because they were scared to be vulnerable themselves. And maybe show some empathy and see like, oh, I'm going through some stuff, or I went through some stuff. Yeah, I just think, yeah, if we could maybe hold a space that was less judgmental and people could be more vulnerable, then we wouldn't run into those. So like guys would come to training and have stuff going on and open up about it. And then there could be maybe a collective way where just teammates would look out for guys' mental health, whether it's got to do with relationships or work. I just think if a guy could even come to training, maybe they were stressed at work and they said something to the captain, and then the captain kind of filtered through a little mess and just be like, boys, just go easy on him a little bit tonight. Like, because it is an intense environment, football, like people demand a certain standard. And sometimes when you're not feeling good, you just don't want people barking at you. You just want to come to football and play. And I think also that needs to be with the coaches too, like that we could approach a coach and be like, I'm really struggling. And the coach could just try and it's not treating you differently. It's just looking out for your players' mental health.
Yeah. Well, Lonnie, you are someone who I've always really looked up to, and counted myself really grateful to have you in my life, because you are the sort of man that I see as a really positive person and someone who's honest and role models those exact behaviors that we think that we need maybe a little bit more in that environment. So thank you for being there for me always, and for being a great friend, and thanks for joining me today, mate.
And thanks for letting me come to speak today. And I really hope that, yeah, maybe by us having these conversations and this project, will allow certain guys to maybe come out a little bit more and speak about things, and maybe the things that we speak about they'll resonate with. And yeah, we'll create a more safer space where guys don't have to suffer in silence, like you said. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lonnie.
Thanks, Darbs.